Hello. Thank you so much for joining us for this webinar called Working as an Artist with a Disability, an Artist's Perspective. My name is Beth Bienvenu, and I'm the Director of Accessibility at the National Endowment for the Arts. A quick note before we proceed. We'll be describing any images on our slides. So this slide has a photo of me, a white woman with medium-length brown hair, glasses, and a purple jacket. This webinar is the fourth in a series of webinars on careers in the arts for people with disabilities. Our first webinar, which was held in May, provided a high-level overview of the field and experiences of artists and arts employers. The second webinar, which was in June, provided information on the financial resources available to people with disabilities seeking careers in the arts. And the third, held in October, gave information on improving educational opportunities for students with disabilities in the arts. They are all archived on our website at arts.gov/videos/webinars. Part of a toolkit due to be launched early next year that will empower artists and other job seekers with disabilities to achieve career success in the arts while educating arts employers, educators, and grant makers on the roles that they play in cultivating full inclusion. The audiences for this toolkit include people with disabilities working in or seeking careers in the arts educators, arts and cultural organizations, and funders. We are doing this work in partnership with Art Beyond Sight as part of a cooperative agreement, and we are looking forward to sharing this work with you. This slide has logos for the National Endowment for the Arts and for Art Beyond Sight. So I'm excited about today's webinar as it will be a conversation between artists with disabilities, talking about their experience working in the arts, including their career trajectories, their experiences with the arts as young people, how they've addressed barriers to working as an artist with a disability, and how they market and position themselves in a competitive arts field. The conversation will be led by Lawrence Carter-Long, the Director of Communications at the Disability Rights, Education, and Defense Fund, or DREDF. Lawrence will provide some background, and then he'll lead a conversation with visual artist Gordon Sasaki, professional recording artist Lachi, and professional singer and musician Galen Lee. So first, a bit of housekeeping for today's webinar. You can access the audio for this webinar by calling 877-685-5350 with the passcode 870335. The audience is muted and will stay muted throughout the webinar. However, you can submit questions for our speakers using the Q&A window on the right-hand side. Captions are available using the link provided in the lower right-hand corner on the screen. Click Browse To, then click on the Browse To button to open the captions in a new window. And please help us to continue the conversation. Throughout this webinar and afterward, please use social media. You can live tweet using the hashtag #DisabilityArtsCareers. This webinar will run for approximately an hour and 15 minutes, and it will be archived on the National Endowment for the Arts website with a transcript, and it will be captioned as well. So before we get started, I'd like to give a note about language. We recognize that there are multiple preferences for the terminology to use when referring to people with disabilities. Throughout these webinars, you will hear us using intentional uses of both person-first language and also identity-first language. And so to dig into today's topic, I'd like to introduce our host. When organizing this webinar, we knew that we wanted Lawrence Carter-Long to help us lead the conversation. I've known Lawrence for over 10 years, and I've known him as not only a key advocate and activist in the disability community, but also as a person with experience working in the arts. Lawrence has worked as a modern dancer with the Heidi Lansky Dance Company, and also as a radio show host and producer, and the curator and co-host of The Projected Image, A History of Disability on Film on Turner Classic Movies, which reached 87 million people. He's also a key disability advocate, having served as the public affairs specialist at the National Council on Disability, and in his current role as the Director of Communications at the Disability Rights, Education, and Defense Fund. So, welcome, Lawrence, and let's get this conversation started, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Beth, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I really appreciate everyone being here, and I've been excited to have this conversation with these fabulous artists. You know, my work has primarily been in media, but as Beth said, I started in the arts many years ago. It was both graphic arts and then performing arts in high school and on into college. So this is, in some ways, a return home for me. So we're going to start out this conversation. I'm going to speak to each of the presenters, and then we'll do kind of a round robin individually, and then we'll do kind of a round robin toward the end. We're going to start out talking to Gordon Sasaki. Gordon, how are you? Are you with us, Gordon?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we've got you now. Hi, how are you?
Hi, Lawrence. Good, good. How are you? Great to hear your voice again.
Yeah,
thank
you. We first met over a decade ago in New York City.
Oh.
Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about your history, your early career as an artist and your early experiences, and maybe how they helped shape you, starting with the type of art that you do.
Well, I'm a visual artist. That means I work in a lot of different forms, but primarily the language is visual. I was born in Hawaii, a longtime resident of New York City, and I'm currently back living and working in Honolulu. I have an acquired disability from a 1982 automobile accident in which I acquired a spinal cord injury. Since that time, I've been using a manual wheelchair to basically get around. Also, at that point, I kind of was thrust into this new world of disability awareness, of which it was really the dark ages. And it really perked my interest as an artist, and since that time I've been working as an advocate as well as a visual artist in the field.
So let's talk a little bit about. So you were a working artist before your accident, and how old were you roughly when the accident occurred? We're talking how long ago?
Early 20s.
Early 20s. So talk a little bit, if you will, maybe about what you learned and some of the things that occurred to you as you made that transition, right? What your life was like before becoming disabled, and then some of the adaptations that you had to make after the disability occurred.
Well, like I was saying, we're talking about 1982. 8 years roughly before the ADA, the Americans with Disability Act. This is really kind of a period of I call it the dark ages of disability, just simply because a lot of it was kind of really kept in the closet, so to speak, and it was difficult for me to get information about this, my current situation. So a lot of it was kind of being creative and having to kind of feel your way through it. And that inevitably kind of fed into my work. And currently the work that I'm doing is kind of a series of these wheelchair paintings and drawings, of which there's a couple on the screen now. And they have a lot to do with visibility as well as invisibility. So I'm using these kind of conventions like camouflage as well as different kind of techniques to play with the act of seeing as well as not seeing. The wheelchair itself is kind of presented in three-quarter view. It is my wheelchair, so in a way these are very much autobiographical, but the chair is empty. It's just a still life, so to speak.
And tell us a little bit, I've come to, when I talk about wheelchair users and wheelchairs in general, I talk about them as being chariots of independence, right? But that's not quite the narrative or the phrasing that you hear in, let's say, conventional media or mainstream media. Why did you decide to put the focus squarely on the wheelchair itself in this series?
Well, number one, it is my wheelchair, and I see it as kind of very much a mobility device of independence, as you say. It's a very important part of me, but it is not the only part of me. But also, disability is something that you rarely, if ever, see in the quote-unquote fine arts or art in general. I feel like, why not, right? Let's talk about this as kind of a form of beauty. If art is a pursuit of beauty, then why can't disability be beautiful? Why can't disability be presented in a way that we could see a bowl of fruit or a beautiful body or anything else?
And so it's really taking your perspective, right, and sharing that with the world, showing them something that they think they're familiar with, but giving it to them from a slightly different perspective.
Yes, and in some cases, people not being familiar with it, especially seeing something that's related to disability can portrayed in kind of a beautiful form can, I think, have a jarring juxtaposition.
Because it's unexpected?
Yes.
Yeah,
sometimes.
And sometimes. And so in getting to the stage, so you've been working for quite a while now as a visual artist. What got you started? Was it parents? Was it teachers? What helped you prepare for working in the arts?
Well, I think it's just part of it is, I mean, largely just my nature. I've been drawing and painting for as long as I can remember. As kind of an introverted child, it gave me a vehicle of expression. It felt very natural to me to create images that have feeling, that have expression, things that weren't easy for me to verbalize. So it kind of was a direction that I was naturally leaning towards. And then once I had by accident, new doors, so to speak, opened up to where I realized that, you know, here I'm in the situation. I still have my hands and my brain, and I can still make art. So why not go in this direction and see where it takes me?
So did you have fears initially that you wouldn't be able to pursue an art career?
I still have fears, but
those are fears that most artists have, right? Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But you know, it's just, I don't know. I think it's something that you do, that you believe in, that you're passionate about, and I think that kind of feeling comes through the work.
So if there are any introverted, let's say, emerging artists who are joining us today, would you have any specific advice for people based on your decades of experience that you maybe you wish you'd known when you were starting that you'd like to share?
Well, I think one of the great benefits that we have now is the internet. I mean, the fact that we have this kind of format that we can work in and be in our living rooms or our bedrooms and just kind of intimately talking about ideas and sharing these different things, I think really opens it up to individuals like myself who, you know, aren't necessarily great at standing up on a stage and, you know, doing that type of thing. So I think more than anything is kind of tapping into resources, looking for artists who have similar ideas, whether it's through Instagram or whether it's through a Google search or whether it's through different social media. Really kind of inform yourself. I feel like this is the most important thing. It's one thing to sit in the studio and to kind of just have a one-to-one relationship to your work, but what happens at the next stage when it leaves the studio and then the work becomes autonomous? It stands on itself. It doesn't have you to talk about. So can a viewer begin to kind of pick up or feel the same type of things that maybe you think the work is pretty obvious, but you know, I think it helps to be an informed artist.
So so let's talk a little bit about the slide that you have on the screen right now. This piece of work is called Gray Glitter Wheelchair, your wheelchair. Describe for people in your own words what they're seeing in this image.
This is actually, the image looks predominantly just black and white, but it has a lot of color in it. It's very muted color, though. They're grays. They're kind of. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's quite it. It's almost a camouflage pattern or
Yeah,
pattern, correct?
Exactly. So I'm using this convention of this World War II camouflage. It's not the type of like digital camouflage we see with the squares now on military uniforms and garb. It has these kind of organic shapes that oftentimes we're familiar with the more greenish tones. But in this, I have a life-size painting or a illustration of my wheelchair itself. So the work is 70 inches vertical by 42 inches width. So it's in a more of a portrait format, so to speak. The chair just floats in the middle of the page. It's acrylic on paper, and I've also included glitter, lots of glitter all over it. There's certain segments that are kind of very tactile, so to speak. It's a little difficult to pick up on the slide, but I think you get the idea. And one of the reasons why I'm using the glitter is this kind of tongue-in-cheek use of something that is, I guess, something we're usually more familiar with in like elementary school. I mean, I love using like glue and glitter and shiny things, and just to give it a little bit of pop. But the camouflage, oops, sorry.
No, go ahead.
The camouflage does conceal the wheelchair somewhat, but I don't want to hide it with the camouflage. I want to kind of the two to kind of be at an equal visual level. So there's kind of a push and pull. Maybe initially you might be kind of pulled toward the work by these different shapes, but later it reveals itself and you begin to kind of read it for what it is.
Right, and you spend a little time with it. Yeah, it's almost like one of those sort of visual tests, right? What do you see within this image? And one of the things that really strikes me about it is as you spend more time with it, different things are revealed to you. So it's hiding in plain sight. And sort of the longer that you spend time with it, the more that you see, which is a really nice effect. Another question I wanted to ask you is that so you were an artist before you became disabled. You've been working as a disabled artist for a number of years now. How does disability inform your work? You know, in this series, obviously, you chose your wheelchair as a subject. Explain other ways that disability has informed the type of work that you do.
So much of my work is about ideas. I am a visual artist, but I feel like being an artist, for me, is about sharing ideas and beginning to kind of understand how we interact with the world itself. So this kind of process of introspection that I've been talking about, it allows me to kind of feel like we are part of a larger whole. And disability is an important part of who I am. And I feel like it's something that oftentimes is either neglected or overemphasized toward the negative. And these are kind of media tropes that begin to influence the larger ideas about culture and who we are and how we all fit together. So I'm exploring these things through my work. In this case, my wheelchair, but in other cases, I paint a lot of different things.
For example, give us some examples.
Currently, I'm doing portraits of dogs.
And everybody loves dogs, but why did you choose dogs specifically?
Recently, I've acquired a service dog. So that was one of the motivations. It's just, you know, taking something that's close to me, like my wheelchair.
Yeah, and dogs are, of course, humans, best friends, as has been displayed throughout millennia. Thanks so much, Gordon. We're going to swing back around. Stay with us. We're going to have questions for everybody as this goes on. So thanks a lot. Anything you want to leave people with before I move to the next?
No. I'm looking forward to the round robin. Thanks.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you so much. And next, Lachi. Lachi, you with us? Hello, Lachi.
Hey, guys.
Hey,
Can you hear me?
there you are. Hi.
Yay.
How's it going, Lachi?
I'm good. Oh.
So we first met just a few months ago in New York City, right? It was during Ad Week.
Yes.
So why don't you tell people a little bit about your work and you're a performing artist, you're a singer. Tell folks about a little bit about how you got started and what you're up to these days.
So I am a recording artist. I am a songwriter, and I am also a published author. And I guess you could call me an influencer, but nobody really takes that title seriously. So, and I'm currently signed to a nice little hefty management deal and publishing deal. And I am located here in New York, Midtown Manhattan, where I have people come to my studio to songwrite and record. And so I am very fortunate in that sense. I started out as a kid, like most people have, and
most people start out as children. Yes, that's right.
Right. No, I tend to tell people that Morgan Freeman was the only person kind of born at about 40. But so basically, while I was a child, I didn't really get a ton of family support to be an artist. I come from an immigrant family, and any people from immigrant families know that it's very much work, do better than the people that are already here. Become a doctor, become a lawyer. And so that was my start, and I really had to push myself to kind of, you know what, I'm very artistic, I'm a writer, I'm a drawer, I'm a singer, and so I pushed myself to, I was raised in a lot of places, but mainly North Carolina. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to go to NYU. I'm going to apply. I'm going to move to New York. I applied to NYU. I didn't get in. I moved to New York anyway, and then I applied again, and somehow I got in. And I pursued music, and here I am now. I like to thank New York, actually, a lot for being my influence in really, going for the arts. It welcomed me with harsh and horrifying but open arms. So there you go.
And I think it's true what they say. I've lived in New York City 3 different times in my life, and the old adage from the song, right? If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. And I think anybody has a shot in New York City. Anything you're interested in is sort of, there's a scene there if you can find it, right? And sort of tap into it. And all of those influences you talked about being in North Carolina, being in New York City, those influences come into your music, right? And I think there was quite a lot of buzz about What I Want, That Body, and people talking about the way you sort of phrase things in that song, right? So you bring all of yourself into your work. Well, so now you have a visual impairment. What specific advice and how has that sort of influenced your work, and how has it come into play as you've moved forward in your career?
So for the first thing I want to do, I guess, actually, is describe the picture of me that they just put up. I'm a girl with hair, and I'm an African American, and I'm wearing a nice little shirt. So, all of me is definitely put into my music. I like to tell people that, I lived in a very white suburb. I lived in a very hood urban place, and I lived in a very southern south city. And all of those kind of came together to influence my music. But one of the largest influences of my music has definitely been the way my disability has influenced my life. I grew up very insular and very introspective. I believe Gordon mentioned something of the sort as well in his come-uppings. I was very in tune with just myself and me, and a lot of the songs and writings I wrote were for me, really. A lot of it was to empower myself. And people tell me a lot of my songs are very empowering, but a lot of the songs I write and continue to write are really to empower myself and to hopefully somebody else gets empowered by the messages that I give to myself to keep going and to stand above and to go. And sorry, I don't know if I answered your question. I'm assuming
I did. I mean, when we met at Adweek, right, and I saw you perform, you blew me away. One of the things that I was really taken by, you seem to pump yourself up, similar to the way that maybe Muhammad Ali would talk himself up before a fight, right? You'd be like, yeah, you can't hurt me, and you just sort of put it all out there. In terms of sort of that confidence and pumping yourself up, which really helps with the type of music that you do. Tell us a little bit about your personal brand, because when I was preparing for this, one of the things that was very strong about your work, in addition to the music, which is central, is the importance of personal branding, right? So you're on all the platforms. Talk about when and how you started to kind of put this persona together, how you formulated it, and how that's been helpful in your career.
So I believe that personal brand is very important, especially when it comes to my brand of ability activism. And my specific brand is, people go out and do this in different ways, and my way is to just go out there and say, hey, look, I'm amazing, so here are all my friends that are also amazing. And the way to continue and make sure that I have as much visibility as possible is to make sure that I have a very strong presence and to make sure that I'm remembered as soon as somebody comes to my page and leaves, that they remember what they saw. And one of the biggest problems that I have personally is that there are not enough, there's not enough representation in the media and in music for people with disabilities to kind of show young people and old people and people of any age that watch TV, listen to the radio, go on social media, that we're here and that we're not some sort of human interest story, that we are actually just as obnoxious and just as hard fighting and just as fun and just as talented as the next guy. And so my brand is very it's a combination of sort of confidence mixed with a hint of vulnerability. It's like, hey, I can do this, but I'm okay to admit my faults. And that's showcased in pretty much every post I post, every talk I do, and it's showcased in my music for sure. And so I continue to hone that brand and put myself everywhere, put myself in front of as many places as possible to showcase that, yes, we all have our vulnerabilities, but we also have our strengths that we need to we also have our strengths in order to overcome those vulnerabilities. And so I'm here to show you that, and I'm here to be a badass about it.
And one of those things that you're overcoming, right, is other people's ableism, right? One of the things that you're sort of pushing up against and serving as just by existence in a lot of ways as a counter narrative to is being who you are and being full on, flat out in front of it, right? That there's no hiding, there's no pretending. That it's like here, clear, kind of in your face a little bit. And
I was just going to go ahead.
Go for it.
I was just going to say, and that's one of the things about personal brand is once you really start getting into it and putting yourself out there and just being true to who you are, it's no longer an act. You know what I mean? You're literally just being yourself and just saying, my personal brand is me, love me, and, the rest will come. And I feel like a lot of times people are told to be a certain way, told to sit a certain way, told to act a certain way. And that's all good and fine, but at the end of the day, the people who really love you and want to support you are the people who are going to love you for who you are, because that's eventually going to come out. Like, you can only pretend you're somebody for so long, and eventually who you are comes out.
Right, and there's another slide on the screen now with a series of pictures showing you in live performance.
Yes.
And the way it kind of strikes. You want to describe these slides, Lachi?
Yes, these are just all different slides of me performing. I'm at the Webster Hall. I'm at the Highline Ballroom. I'm at different places around the city and also pretty much around just different cities. And they're showcasing me at nightlife events singing. I've had the pleasure of being
the bitter end, it looks like. Looks like the bitter end there in the bottom center. Yeah.
There's me at the bitter end. I've had the pleasure to perform in a lot of really amazing places around the globe and just meet a ton of really awesome people. And, I just want to go back to my other point. I didn't have these opportunities until I really, started being just feeling comfortable with who I am and just walking in and saying, hey, work with me. I've gotten to work with, Armin van Buuren and Snoop Dogg and Marcus Schultz and just a bunch of names that, I'll post something on Twitter or something going oh, hey guys, I just, bumped into a pole today, whatever, #disability. And these guys are seeing it. You know what I mean? These famous people, quote unquote, are seeing it. And it's do I sit there and be afraid and limit what I want to say? Or do I just be myself and hope these guys still want to work with me? And that's actually literally my current qualm. But I'm deciding to, just be myself and let them see it. And
it seems to me that they probably want to work with you because you are who you are, because you're
right.
being who you are. You're not pretending, trying to be somebody else. There's an internet meme out there that says, see the person, not the disability. And what it sounds like to me you're doing is you're flipping that a little bit and you're saying, you see the person and the disability. See the entire picture, not just a portion of it. And that way you're getting a more complete sense of who a person is, because there are funny things that happen to us. We do walk into poles, why shouldn't we be able to put that out on social?
Right. I mean, I 100% agree. It's I'm not going to pretend I'm not going to try to get into a thing that's only for a certain type of person and then say, I'm a different person, let me in. I'm going to say, this is who I am, let me in and accept this. It's why, again, as I said, it's going to come out anyway.
Right, and get on board or miss out.
Or miss out. You know what? I see it as a unique selling point. You know how you're supposed to see yourself as a business? I see my disability as a USP. So it's hi, I'm legally blind. Use me and use this. And, I get way more yays than nays, especially in this climate of, African Americans have, what they need. They have their leaders, standing up for them. Females have their leaders standing up. And it's high time for disabled people have their leaders kind of stand up. And I'm very excited that a lot of organizations are starting to turn around and listen to some of the leaders in this space.
And learning how to make that part of the tapestry rather than trying to think it's something shameful, right? Life is too short for somebody else's shame, right? We gotta be who we are, and sometimes that means be big, go big. So thank you, Lachi. We're gonna circle. Yeah, you got it. So we're gonna circle back around. Stay with us, and we'll have questions for everybody in just a little bit. Anything you want to add before we move on?
I do not. I'm just excited for the next segment.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks so much.
Yep.
Galen Lee, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Hello, my friend. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. I'm so lucky. We got to visit a little bit last month in Indiana. For those folks who don't know or might need a little bit of a refresher, tell us a little bit about how you got started in the arts. You're a performing artist. You also do a lot of speaking and presenting and some writing, but we're here to talk about the music mostly. Tell us how you got started within playing music.
Yeah, well, I'll describe the slide, and then I will explain how I got started. So the slide of me is a picture of me in a brightly colored rocking chair wearing a dress that coincidentally matches exactly. It's got purple and teal and orange, and I have short brown hair and bendy arms, shorter limbs, and a pink flower on the left side. And I got started in music when I was 10. I mean, my family is very musical, and my parents grew up, my mom's a choir director, and my parents met in a musical, actually. So it's been a part of my life forever. But in fourth grade, an orchestra came and played for us, and I just kind of became really enamored with the sound of strings. And so the next year, I asked, there was like a call out to the fifth grade. If you wanted to try out for orchestra, you could take a music listening test. So I went and got out of class. That was part of the motivation. Got out of class and did the music listening test, and I was the only student that got a perfect score that year. So the teacher, I think, even though it wasn't clear because of my disability, my arms and legs are both kind of bent at 90-degree angles, so they're a lot shorter. It wasn't really clear how I was going to play, but she knew that, I had musical potential. So she just said, I've never done this before, but I'd like to try to experiment with you and see if we can find a way for you to play. And so we tried out the cello, and it was too big, and the violin couldn't fit on my shoulder because my arm wasn't long enough to reach the fingerboard, but we kind of compromised on a way where I don't even know who thought of it originally, but we decided I would play up and down. There's a picture of me playing in my electric wheelchair right now on the screen. I'm holding it kind of like a tiny cello, and I hold my bow like a bass player does. And so I've been doing that since I was 10. Songwriting came a lot later. I performed in orchestra for a long time, and then I in college went into kind of some folk music and traditional fiddle music, and then after college started kind of joining folk bands and played backup. But then eventually I met a person that really shaped what I do. His name is Alan Sparhawk in the band Low, and he showed me what a looping pedal is. And so that's probably a whole other question, but the looping pedal is...
Explain I was going to say, explain for people who don't know what it is.
Yeah, it's pretty confusing. It's in my wheelchair in this picture that's on the screen right now. It's the little metal box right down by my foot, and it's a recording device. And so it happens live. I push a button down, and it records what I do, and for that moment, it only goes up to 30 seconds, I think, my particular pedal. And then when I let go of the button, it plays it back again and again. And so I can build up these layers of sound. So you can have up to about 12 different layers of sound at once. And so I do it all live, so it can either be really fun or go terribly wrong. It took a while to learn because the rhythm is such a key part of that. But when I got this looping pedal from Alan Sparhawk, he said, well, someday you'll perform by yourself. And I was like, haha, that'll never happen. But it really did open up this creative world for me, and I ended up kind of spontaneously writing my own songs, which is not something I ever thought I would do. I was 27 when I wrote my first original song, and so it was long after I got the violin and started playing that I started writing. So that's the beginning, and it sort of feels like a windy road where you're always just kind of following the little breadcrumbs and seeing what comes next,
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit more about that evolution. So you mentioned how you and your first teacher made adaptations, right, to the traditional way people play the violin or string instruments. And can you talk about how adapting, you talked about how that came to be, but I'm really interested to find out how adapting instruments and other art forms, even sometimes things as seemingly simple or benign as getting from one place to the other, require a certain degree of inventiveness, and how that fits into the broader picture of, let's say, disability culture.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so this kind of thing makes me really excited, and it's something I didn't think about until I think it was actually a conversation I had with you early on when I first met you about how, if you dance differently because you walk differently, how that can be actually part of the product, like in a good way, like something that makes the art what it is, rather than like, oh, it's good, but there's this person that walks differently, right? And so for me, playing differently I didn't, it wasn't like harder to learn. So that's something I get asked a lot. Like, was it hard to learn to adapt? Because if you're in a wheelchair, for example, like mine, and you have shorter arms, everything you do is adapting, right? So the idea of adapting.
I guess that begs the question, right? Harder than what? Right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, this is you. Yeah, so like the thing is, if it wasn't harder than learning a violin any other way, it might have been harder for my teacher to think outside the box originally, but as the student, I always adapt everything, and so this is just the way I learned, and it wasn't harder or easier than any other way. But what I didn't think about until a lot later is there are specific things, like I use a cello vibrato instead of a violin vibrato. I use the lower strings more often because just the way that my positioning is, you tend to favor the side closest to you, right? And so, and that creates a sound that's actually unique to me. Like my music is specifically different, just slightly enough where people notice it. They're like, oh, it sounds kind of like a traditional Chinese instrument, or like are you playing a viola? Like there's a specific sound that comes with my music, and it's actually because of the way I play, and it wasn't intentional, but it's like an added bonus. And I think that thinking about disability culture, if we widen the spectrum of what we call technique, right? Like my technique looks nothing like a regular violin player, right? But because I had that awesome teacher that didn't really care if the technique was the same as long as the sound was pretty, we were able to create something that's actually new and maybe not better than, but equally as artistic and creative as any other violinist. But you have to be willing to widen the lens of what counts as technique, right? And so if you expand all arts, all artists, any musical instrument to include as many people as possible by widening that lens of what is good technique, and what really matters is the sound or the end result of visual arts or the writing, whatever you have to do to get there. If you allow more technique methods, you actually create a more diverse artistic field, right? And I think that's a really powerful way to talk about disability culture, is like we're kind of out here on the margins, on the outside right now, but the arts is not despite the disability, but because of the disability. And if you widen the lens big enough to include us, how much cooler could art be, right? That's what I think, anyway.
And the adaptations that you're making become part of the fabric, part of the tapestry of the art you make, right? It can't be separated in many ways, because it all comes from you and from your experience. Now, you really hit the national spotlight. Sort of came on like a rocket, right? This was with the Tiny Desk contest. This was what, is this 2016? Have I got the year right?
Yep, you do, yeah.
And haven't stopped touring since. Am I correct?
Yeah, basically that is correct. I won the contest in March of 2016.
Why don't you tell people what the contest was? And then we can talk a little bit about the touring.
Yeah, the contest it's put on by National Public Radio every year. They've been doing it for 5 years. I was the second winner, so the second year. And basically you record a video of you performing an original song in front of a desk. And that's because they want the video to be original for that contest. And so you record the song in front of a desk and you submit it, and you can't be signed to a record label. That's the other thing. So I wasn't, and so I submitted this song that I wrote, and you don't hear anything for like a month, and then one day I was teaching fiddle lessons, because that's what I was doing for a living at the time, and in between lessons I checked my email, and they had called to set up a phone call, or had emailed to set up a phone call with me, and later that day we did the call, and they announced that I had won. They told me that I won, and it was really incredibly surprising.
And you did something really unique. You did something really unique with that video. Let's say the song is 3 minutes long or something like that. I'd say for almost 2 of them, people don't even see you.
Yeah.
in that video, right? You kind of give, now was this intentional? What seemed to me that you gave people a lot of time to sort of sit with your music and to be with that song, right? To sort of let that music get into their bones a bit. And then before revealing anything about, let's say, your disability, you know, which is visually quite obvious, was that intentional?
It was. There were two reasons for it. The first is that I literally was recording it on my phone, and so my friend was in my office on the phone. The only special effect we had was zoom and zoom out, right? So, like, that was a very limited technique, but I was like, you know, there's a few reasons that zooming in on, it was zoomed in right on my hand and the scroll of the violin, so you could only see me. You can only see my hand and the upright position of the top of the violin, so you couldn't see anything else. And there was a couple of reasons I did that. Is one, the first minute and a half of the tune is just looping, so it's only instrumental, and by the end of the instrumental portion, there's about 12 loops going on, and so I wanted people to be a little bit confused, like is there more than one instrument? I also liked that my hand is upright in the position of a cello because it's clearly not a cello, but you don't know why I'm holding it that way, so you just kind of are left wondering. And then, of course, the third reason was I didn't want the first thing that people saw to be me, only because, as Lachi said, there's not a lot of disabled artists. We don't have any good education around disability in our country, like K through 12. People just don't have the, right tools to analyze it, like, at the beginning, right? So if they like the music and then they realize I have a disability, I think it's still kind of surprising to them, but they didn't come in with conceptions because by then, hopefully,
Right.
they already liked the music.
So
you know
they
what I'm saying?
they weren't really bringing whatever baggage they might have to the song, or to your work. You sort of hooked them with the song before the reveal, right? So that they could experience that first, right? Dive into the work first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, Lachi doesn't look necessarily disabled, where if I looked at a picture of her, I wouldn't necessarily know that she has vision loss. But for me, there really is no way to hide that visually. Like, I 100% look disabled.
And it's not that you're wanting to. And it's not that you're wanting to hide it, but it was a strategic decision as to let them hear the music first.
Exactly, because once they saw it, they were going to insert whatever opinions they had. But if you get them right before that happens, it was just sort of a sneak attack, which I thought was the one clever thing we could do with a cell phone videographer. So it was fun.
Yeah, no, it was absolutely brilliant. And so you've been touring basically ever since then. So for the last over 3 years. And from looking at your work on social and talking to you about this and hearing your keynote at the conference, it's almost become a second career. In terms of addressing the barriers you've encountered, the sort of physical barriers on the road. Can you tell people, and I think that's important, especially for performing artists who are working, can you talk a little bit about how you've addressed those kind of access barriers, and what are some ways that organizations, venues, non-disabled artists can be better allies?
Yeah, so I started touring in October 2016. And since then, we've been on the road about 9 months every year. So I do about 200 shows a year. And the thing is when we started, you don't know what you're doing. You're kind of like, wow, this is a great opportunity. I'm going to do every possible show I can do. And I would end up playing at places that were very difficult. I mean, even for me to get into the building, right? Like, once in a while I would show up and there would be stairs and they'd have to lift my chair in. Or I wouldn't be able to use the bathroom. Paul would have to carry me in. My husband, Paul, would have to carry me into the bathroom. Or, like, the stage was always a big issue. Like, very infrequently would there actually be a ramp. And so often I would have to get out of my chair. They'd lift it up. It's about 300 pounds. It's an electric wheelchair. And then they would have to lift me onto the stage and put me in my chair. And first of all, that's tiring, right? Like, walking into an obstacle course every show is just exhausting.
Right, and you want to be, and I can speak from my experiences, doing performing arts within dance. When you're getting ready to do a show, you're showing up at the venue. Your head's in the performance. You're thinking about the set list. You're thinking about how's the sound. You're thinking about the gig that you're going to give. You don't want to be worried about these kind of logistics, right?
Yep. And the last straw for me was sort of, there was this venue I played at that they didn't have a ramp. I did the gig. They said, we really need to get a ramp. We'll have to work on that. I came back a year later and they still didn't have a ramp. And I said, I thought you guys were going to get a ramp. And they said, well, last time we just lifted you up in the chair and we thought we would just do that again. And I realized that this wasn't going to change unless I forced my hand on it, because people literally saw lifting my wheelchair as an equivalent to getting a ramp, because they weren't thinking of the human dignity or independence side of it. They were thinking of the physical, like, well, she got on stage, didn't she? And so I realized at this point that I do have, even though it's not a huge platform, I have some of a platform at this point, and I'm just, for me, I only weigh 70 pounds, but I like to think of anything I do that speaks loudly for disability rights. I want it to encompass as many disabled people as possible, right? So if I'm only gonna, if I'm allowing people to lift me on stage, and that might work for me, but it doesn't work for somebody who is 300 pounds and 6'4", right? And maybe doesn't have good muscle control, and so they wouldn't be able to handle, getting up stage. So, I want the solution that we come up with to benefit all of disabled artists. I'm talking about people with mobility aids, because that's primarily who needs the ramps, right? And so I want the ramps to actually work for everyone. I want that change to happen so everybody can appreciate it and use it. And so I started deciding that I would only play at venues where people with disabilities could get into the door, they could use the bathroom, and they could watch the stage, they could see the stage from a reasonable spot, right? Not have to be in another room watching it on a TV or something. And so then those were my 3 criteria for venues, but then if they didn't have a ramp, I decided for the stage that I would just play on the floor, because it's awkward for the venue. It's safer for me, but it also really makes the point, why isn't she on the stage? Oh, well, how would she get up there? You know what I mean? And I don't have to talk about it from the stage. I don't have to be a jerk about it during my show, but I can. It just makes the point, and I try really hard. I'm doing my own booking now. Try really hard to get them to get a ramp, but it has to be a ramp that's safe enough where people aren't endangering their own lives to use it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sometimes.
So if you.
Yeah.
So if you had one bit of advice, one thing that you could offer, or that people who might be touring and might have access and accommodation needs, if there's one thing you've learned in the course of this process that you think is beneficial, you could share with people, what's that thing that they need to know?
I would say don't give up hope and don't sell yourself short. So I know it's frustrating. I think people maybe misunderstand sometimes how big of a platform I have. Winning the Tiny Desk was a very big deal, but my shows are still not huge. They're 20 to 100 people, right? Depending on the city. And so it's not like I'm this huge, not Beyonce by any means, right? And so it is harder and it does take more work, but I see change happening because I've set these standards. And so I recently played a show in North Carolina where they did a fundraiser in September without telling me to raise money to buy a permanent stage lift. And then they installed it before the show. And then it surprised me with it. And that is huge because they know that I'm serious about what I'm talking about, right? And I think that we need more people. So don't lose hope. Really don't sell yourself short. Don't endanger your own well-being to play somewhere. And then it might be harder for us in this generation to find accessible venues. But I just think about all the little kids when I see in the audience a little kid with a disability at my shows. I'm just I want them to have it easier than I do. So think big picture, right? and just disabled artists and non-disabled artists. If we had, if every disabled artist did this, but also non-disabled artists, like set the standards of where they will perform and that they won't be listed on stage. Like if a non-disabled artist said, hey, your ramp doesn't have a stage, I'm going to play on the floor, that would send a pretty, big message, right? And so I just don't think it's going to take that long if we're united on accessibility. And then the next thing I want to conquer is I really want to find a way to afford to have ASL interpretation at my shows, because it's important to me to not just think about people with wheelchairs, right? I want everybody to be able to enjoy music.
And anybody that's seen sign language interpretation of music knows that is an art in and of itself, right?
Oh,
and
yeah,
people that do
gorgeous.
that really well do some fantastic things. Thank you, Galen. I've got a question here for everybody. So if all the presenters could hop on, anybody that feels compelled to answer, we've got a question from the audience. Does the money you make in your careers negatively affect your benefits? These are things like SSDI or medical expenses or rehab, and if so, how have you been able to navigate that? So anybody who has some insight there, say your name and answer the question. Thank you.
This is Galen, and my SSI actually got cut when I got married, and so it doesn't impact SSI because I don't receive any. However, the reason I'm able to practice art and public speaking and actually get paid for it is because in Minnesota we have Medicaid for employed people with disabilities, and the income limits are not as restrictive. So I can keep my health care, but I don't have SSI. But I know, there, if you were to do work where you could donate part of the ticket sales, if you could find creative ways to keep it within that range, or do a lot of free shows, that kind of sucks though. It's a conundrum, right? Like we have to get better at supporting people, and not allowing them to just lose their benefits. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I think it does bear mentioning, right, that sort of what we call a tax on disability, that simply trying to have our careers, live our lives, even things like get married, can negatively affect or impact disabled people in ways that it doesn't our non-disabled peers. Does anybody else have any insight that they'd like to add? Thanks, Galen.
This is Gordon. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, man.
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to make sure that I was on. I also am married, so I'm in a similar situation with Galen. But one of the things, I do work with a foundation in New York that supports artists with disabilities. And one of the things that we have kind of become aware of is that by setting up a third-party trust, individuals can still receive grants or whatever and receive their benefits. So that's kind of a workaround that we've discovered that is very useful for people with. I mean, obviously, if you lose your benefits, it's impossible to accept any kind of advancement in your career. So, there's a built-in contradiction like you were talking about, Lawrence. But this tends to be a good workaround.
Great. That's a good thing, I think, for people to understand. You've got to be creative about this in the same ways that we have to be creative about everything else. Another question for everybody. I think we all agree, the discussions and the debates over person first language or identity first language persist, and they continue to this day. As Beth mentioned at the beginning, a lot of folks tend to use them interchangeably. How do you individually navigate the language that you use and that you prefer that others use when discussing your art and disability, and as you tell your stories in general? Anybody care to lead with that one?
Hey, it's Lachi. I am being heard. Yes? No?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Oh. Yeah, I believe that language plays a very important role, especially considering the fact that in other marginalized communities, they've decided to make it a priority to own their words and to own their identity. And I believe that as disabled folks, we should do the same thing. People just don't know. One of the things that I would, you know, sort of caution people against would be to be so quick to be disappointed in people. It's all just their ignorance. They don't know that what they should call you. And I think that once they are taught and once they do know, if they decide not to respect what you've asked them, then that's a whole different story. But I say, like, you know, just be patient. Tell people how you want to be observed or billed, especially if you're a live performer. Now, I don't know, and even for just to be billed if you're just showcasing art as well. If they're a relatively legitimate situation, they'll ask you, how do you want to be presented? How would you like the MC to say your name or talk about you, give you a blurb? Or how would you like us to bill you on the flyer? And at that time, you can let them know that this is what I want you to say, and you can even say these are things I would want you to steer away from. Please don't use the term handicapped, or please don't use the term, you know, whatever. So that's what I tend to do. And if they don't, I would say don't be afraid to take the initiative and just tell them yourself. If for whatever reason the MC is just about to go on, you know, don't be afraid to kind of say, hey, hold on a second. I just want to make sure that you understand that I don't like to be called differently abled. I like to be called disabled. Or I don't like to be called blind. I like to be called visually impaired, or whatever, just to let them know so that you're not stuck in a sticky spot where the entire audience now walks away thinking we should call you blind and differently abled, et cetera.
Fantastic. Anybody else have anything to, Galen.
Yeah, I agree with Lachi that it's most often ignorance and that being patient is good. And the way I deal with it, just in my own advocacy work, is I use disabled and person with a disability pretty interchangeably, because I really truly feel like the context shifts the words that I want to use. But I think it's sort of like gender pronouns for me. I mean, I think it's important to say, how do you want me to address your disability? And just ask and respect what that person says. You know, if somebody says, this is the word I want to use, I mean, I will defer to them for their own description. The only time I don't have as much patience is with the media, because I think that the harm that they can do to people with disabilities culturally is pretty great. And so whenever I talk with reporters, I always try to have that conversation of, like, you can say disabled or a person with a disability or that I use a wheelchair, but I don't want to have you say I suffer from anything or that I'm confined to a wheelchair. Like, these are not the way, it doesn't accurately reflect how I feel about my own life, and I don't want to use those words. And there are a few times where I've actually where we've even had this discussion, and then somehow the title is like, you know, wheelchair-bound musician overcomes disability to perform inspiring performance. You know, like, the titles are terrible, and and at that point, I either email the reporter or sometimes have had to resort to reader comments and say that's not an accurate way that I discuss my disability, and I want you to change it. And they'll be mad, but they will change it most of the time. I don't think I've ever had someone outright refuse to change the wording if it's been really egregious. I mean, I don't call every single tiny word out, but I do believe the headlines that we read about disability just perpetuate negative ideas a lot of times, and I don't have a lot of tolerance for that at this point, just because it's like we're so close to breaking into the mainstream that we don't need this inspiration baggage or this, like, suffering pity baggage to come with it.
And I work with my day job, sort of my 9 to 5, right? I work with the media all the time, and my sense is it used to be a lot more difficult, sort of giving them the framework or the guidelines But I find it's getting easier. What I find more often than not these days is they don't know and they're afraid to ask, and when you tell them, by and large, not everybody, but by and large, they go, thank you, and it kind of takes the pressure off. Would you say that's true?
I do think that is true. I mean, there is still, like, I remember a big article came out in The Guardian about me, and the reporter was very sensitive. She was super awesome. We had a great talk. She ran, like, potentially problematic paragraphs by me so that we could, like, word them together. She was great, but the editor is the one that makes the headlines, and it was, proving her doctors wrong is the title. And that wasn't anything that was not an accurate title. And so I had to go to reader comments for that. And when I changed it, or when I requested to change, the editor said that he would change it, but it wouldn't get as many clicks. And I said, well, I don't care. Please change it anyways. And so it depends on who you talk to, but overall, even that guy changed it. And the thing is I try to educate when I talk to reporters. I say, anytime you're using words about disability, if you notice any negative connotation, just leave it out. Like a lot of people will use the word frail when describing me because I am small, but I'm not frail. And so that's, to me, when you have a negative connotation attached to the language that you use, it's just better to go neutral. You don't have to go overly positive. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I find I go the other direction when I talk to them a lot of times and say things like, I suffer from ableism, and let them figure that out. Another question from the audience. This person asks, all of you are outspoken and have obviously overcome your hesitancy about getting into the spotlight. Do you have any advice for artists with disabilities who may be talented but aren't as comfortable sharing their talents? Any advice?
Well, hey.
Oh, yeah, you go first. You go first.
Oh, go ahead. All right.
Oh.
So I was going to say, I used to be super quiet. Like, I was afraid of everything and everyone. If a butterfly flew by, I would run and hide. And now you can't get me to stop talking. Unless, like the curator tells me to put my phone on mute. In fact, I've been talking this whole time. You just haven't heard me. My phone's been on mute. But basically, I think that what you kind of have to sort of recognize is that one of the reasons, and this is, I don't know if this is just personal to me, but one of the reasons I was just so afraid is because I allowed pretty much everything around me to kind of dictate what I should say, what I should do. I always felt like if I spoke up, I'd be saying the wrong thing. Or I would just feel super embarrassed about, like, if I said something, oh my God, everybody thought that was so dumb, that was so stupid, or, oh, I hurt someone's feelings. If I say anything else, I'm going to hurt another person's feelings. Let me just not say anything. But I think that the real, like, root of the issue just has to do with not being as comfortable with your own opinions of yourself. I know that, it's a lot of letting in other people sort of their own experiences and their own thoughts of what's right and wrong sort of influence, what you think you should or shouldn't do. And then once you start to slowly get comfortable with what you believe is good, what you believe is right, and what you believe is wrong, and you're able to say something and stand behind it 100%, that does start to kind of go away. And there is still an element of what's that word? Risk. There's an element of being ready to take risks. I mean, as an artist, you're already going to have to put yourself out there and put, like, your art, which is your heart and soul, on your sleeve for other people to judge in the first place. So it does kind of start with being okay with taking a risk and being ready for people to reject you and say no. If I walk outside in a big bright pink dress and red shoes and, yellow leggings, and, someone's going to come up to me and go, you should probably just go back to your home wearing that. And I have to be ready to go, you know what, you're right. Or, no, I'm going to walk through these streets because I decided to wear these shoes with these leggings, and I'm just going to do it. So sometimes you just have to just try it a few times, take the hit, and learn how to be okay even though you've done something embarrassing.
Yeah, there's some truth, I think, in that old joke about how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, 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 right? That you've got to practice in order to get better at doing that. As Laura Hershey said, you get proud by practicing. Another question before we've got to close up here.
Can I add one thing to that? Is
Go
that
for it.
possible? Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I think we have in our society like a big, like idea that everybody just hits it and makes it big or they don't go anywhere. And in my experience, just watching the people around me who have created careers that are longer and bigger than mine, but who I have known just because of where I grew up and everything, a lot of it has to do with just doing the best art you can and putting it out there and finding those few people that do connect with it and then make art for yourself, of course, but like you don't have to try to be everything to everyone. You make art for the people who connect with it, and that number will, and you put yourself out there to those people because those are the people that want to hear from you. So I felt weird at first about advertising for all my gigs on Facebook when I was first starting out, or like doing a blog. I'm like, who cares? Except for the people that like your art actually do care and they want to hear from you. And so anything if you're gonna, it's to get yourself out of the negative mindset of like, I'm just, who am I to be, putting myself out there, find those people that do connect with what you do and remember that they want to hear from you. And so that you can be making art for yourself and for them at first, and then just it grows over time. It's the artists I know that like quote unquote became big after like 10 or 15 years of doing it like nonstop. You know what I mean? There's a lot of behind the scenes that we don't see. When I performed for 10 years before I won the Tiny Desk contest, like I was performing in my hometown for 10 years.
Yeah, that's a good point. And thank you. And there are people that like you, people that don't like you yet, and people that don't like you. Put your attention in the first two, right?
Exactly.
One last question.
Can I add something, Lauren? Sorry.
Please do.
Somebody was talking about disability art and being a disabled artist and the difference, and I think it's very important to kind of think about if it's about inclusion and communication. I mean, it's really about trying to communicate disability awareness to individuals or to the media or to culture in terms of just letting people know that disability is not a four-letter word. There's a certain fear. I understand that. But I think when we begin to kind of look at the arts, I really feel like the reason why art is so powerful is that when we look at the art, disability goes away. It really does.
Well, I wanted to ask that. That's the question I was trying to kind of get to, which is, what role does art play in advancing disability rights and shaping culture? And moreover, specifically to this question, Gordon and anyone else, how would you define disability art, those words together, and how is that unique, distinct, and different from, let's say, art in general? Why is it an important distinction?
I think.
Oh, you go first, Gordon.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Oh man. So you got everybody excited. Okay, so I was just going to say that I think art and disability is important because it gives people a voice where they haven't had one. They're represented in the media in a way they haven't been before. But disability art specifically, it's a hard one to necessarily clarify because all my songs, for example, are shaped because I'm a person who breaks bones randomly and, can go from very healthy to needing to recoup for 6 weeks in like a moment, right? And so all my music is about the temporariness of life, but there are some songs more specifically about disability, and those are important again because we forget that disability affects 1 in 5 people in America, and there hasn't been a lot of mainstream music.
And you know what? It's
like,
actually 1 in 4 now, according to the CDC.
Wow.
It's 26%. Yeah. 26%.
Yeah, so 26% of people haven't had the mainstream media producing anything for them, right? And I think disability art is the answer to that. Like, hey, we hear you, we see you. This is your experience, and this is my experience, and they're valid. and I think that's important.
Anybody want to add to that?
This is Gordon. For me, I feel like because we're dealing with disability art kind of empowers individuals or reframes the conversation about disability. There's kind of information that's important to share just simply because with disability there's so much baggage that we kind of have to rewrite for the public or individuals who are not aware of even how to talk about it. We often run into people who are afraid to even talk about the subject just simply because they feel like it's taboo or there's issues around it that they really don't want to get into.
Yeah, that's good. So we're sort of training people in part, right? You wouldn't be expected to hide your gender or your ethnicity, so why should you be hiding the fact that you have a disability and that in some way maybe informs one's art? Lachi, you have anything to add there?
Yeah, well, firstly, I do want to sort of parrot what everyone's been saying in terms of, like, the more visibility there is for us in media, the more young minds and just the general masses will get to see that I just specifically think of shows like RuPaul's Drag Race. I'm obsessed with that show. In fact, it's one of my favorite shows. And it really just showed America. America is in love with drag queens now. And, 10 years ago before the show, it was kind of, confusing or frowned upon or whatever. And I just believe that the more we're in people's faces and showing how amazing people with disabilities are in media, then the more that young minds and those who are curious or those who just want to sit down and watch TV and find something new will be informed. But one of the things that Galen said that I kind of wanted to second and kind of add to that I really liked was just the phrase of, just the whole concept of, who am I to stand up and be a advocate for disability, or who am I to even stand up and showcase my art? If anyone is thinking that kind of thought, a lot of it is because, people are trying to introduce negativity around you, but I'd say to you, like, who are they? If your thought is, well, who am I to? Then my response is, well, who are they to tell you you can't? Whoever tells you you can't, who are they? And that's all I think.
That's great. Yeah, that's a good point. In terms of the art that we produce, I sort of say that life is, life, liberty, and the pursuit of artistic expression is too important to deny or delay because of somebody else's shame. You don't have to pick up that suitcase and carry it around. I want to thank everybody. We have to wrap now, but I want to thank everybody for your wonderful insights. If people could just real quickly say your name and the best way for people to find out more about you on social media or the internet, why don't you do that? We'll start in the order that we did the questioning. So with Gordon, Lachi, and then Galen, please.
People can see some of my recent work at Gordon Pet Portraits on Instagram. It's Gordon, pet as in PET, and portraits, Portraits.
Wonderful. Thank you. Lachi?
Hey, everybody, it's Lachi. You can find me at Lachi Music. That's LACHIMUSIC. And you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Google, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you find your music, whatever you do, just Google Lachi. I'm there. I'm in your face, and I'm in your living room.
Galen, it's you.
Hi.
Where can people you've got a Christmas album, right? Deepest Darkness, the Brightest Dawn. So where can people get that and the other work that you produced?
My website is Violin Scratches, VIOLINSCRATCHES.com, violinscratches.com. Also, I'm on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram at Galen Lee, GAELYNNLEA. The album Deepest Darkness, Brightest Dawn is a really fun violin looped album with Christmas tunes and other holiday traditionals, and you can find that at Spotify or CD Baby or anywhere that music is sold. yeah, so it's keep in touch because I'm out there as well. I guess I am probably in your living room too.
Well, and you've been in their living rooms and in their offices for the last hour and about 20 minutes. I want to thank the National Endowment for the Arts and Art Beyond Sight for hosting this webinar. Thank you for joining us, and I'm going to turn this back over to Beth for some closing words. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Lawrence, Gordon, Lachi, and Galen. This was a great conversation. We so appreciate you taking the time to do this. You've been a big part of this work, and we're looking forward to launching our toolkit next year. And we also have 2 more webinars coming up in early 2020, so stay tuned for details. We'll let you all know about them. And I'd also like to thank our partners at Art Beyond Sight for their support for this webinar. So thank you, everyone, and we hope you have a wonderful holiday season, and we look forward to talking to you in 2020. Have a great day.